All right, everybody. Working Man's Kollel. As we venture through Masechet Shabbos, I got insider info that you guys already did the first Mishnah in the 14th chapter, which is actually a critical and very fundamental Mishnah, and it's where we're going to pick up with today. We're going to see that this Mishnah really is going to teach us the fundamental principles behind two of the malachas on Shabbos. Number one, or two of the prohibitions, we'll call it, on Shabbos. One is defining the prohibition of causing a bruise on Shabbos, and the other is the prohibition of trapping an animal on Shabbos. So both of them are actually quite prevalent today, very prevalent today. Causing bruising on Shabbos has a lot of ramifications in the area of medicine on Shabbos. Things like, removing a splinter, right? Popping a pimple, things that we do all the time. But on Shabbos, we have to think twice about it. And with regard to capturing, we're going to see actually is very prevalent in the area of if someone owns an animal, they have a pet, and the pet goes indoors and it goes outdoors and it goes from one room, it goes to another room, right? There are very practical questions that can come up that come straight from our Mishnah. So let's begin. The Mishnah tells us, Shmona Shrotzen Hamur b'Torah. So there are 8 types of creepy crawly rodents that the Torah describes in the area of Tumah v'Tahara, that if you were to touch these types of animals, so the Torah tells us that you would be tameh if they were dead. You touch these corpses, you're tameh. So these rodents, hatzadan v'hachova behen b'Shabbos, if you were to capture them, if you were to trap them, or bruise them on Shabbos, so you would be chayev. Now, it's important to note why it is specifically these 8 shrotzim. I am not a sheretz. I am not a rodent. And as much as maybe my older brother might have treated me like one when I was a little kid. But I certainly am not, and therefore you have to wonder why the Mishnah is trying to point out these particular ones. So Rashi tells us,
aren't all animals tameh? All dead animals tameh?
No, not all dead animals.
No,
not all dead animals.
Oh.
Most of them are, not all of them. But why is the Mishnah specifically specifying these animals? And it's a 2-part question, because number one, it's in the area of tzad. There are 2 malachas being pointed out over here, 2 prohibitions. There's the capturing of them and then the bruising of them, right? So why specifically these animals? So Rashi tells us right away. Take a look. You see where my cursor is on the right side of the screen. Rashi says, Hatzadan, if you were to capture them, you're chayev. Why? Shibimino nitzud. Because these are animals that are commonly caught, right? They are hunted. They are captured. These types of animals. By the way, what's included in these animals are animals such as weasels and mice, hedgehogs, different types of lizards, moles, things like that. Okay, so being that these animals are normally caught and captured and hunted, therefore, if you were to capture it on Shabbos, we assume that your intention was because you needed the animal. We learned in the last chapter about the fact that you're only going to be liable for capturing if you actually need the thing that you're capturing, right? If you don't need the thing that you're capturing, so then that's called a malacha she'ena tzricha legufa. It's doing a malacha for not its purpose, for a different purpose, and therefore you're not going to be chayiv. You're not going to be liable to bring a carbon on Shabbos, according to Reb Shimon, and we're still sticking in line with Reb Shimon. But over here, even though you didn't specify the fact that you are intending to capture these animals, but the fact that these animals are normally caught, we will assume that that was your intention, and therefore you'd be chayiv. Va'achovel behen, and let's say someone bruises these animals. Diesh lahen or. Now, why are you going to be chayiv for bruising these animals? Because they have skin. Okay, and what we're mean over here is a thick skin. So these animals have two unique aspects to them. Number one is that they normally are caught, and number two is that they have thick skin. And that's why these animals, these Shmona Shratzim, are the prime examples for what we are going to discuss in our Mishnah. So right away, our Mishnah is telling us that there are two definitions we need to know when it comes to the prohibition of capturing, when it comes to the prohibition of causing a bruise. Number one, in order to be liable for causing something a bruise, the thing you are bruising needs to have a skin, and hatzadan by tzad, it needs to be something that is normally caught. Continues the mission of a shar shtatzim, and when it comes to other types of creepy crawling things, v'ramazim, hachovel bahen, if one were to wound them, pater, you would be exempt. Why is it that you would be exempt? So Rashi tells us, just based on what we learned just now. Rashi says, with regard to the fact that it's Chabala, with regard to the bruising, you're not going to be liable. Why? Because de'ein lahem or. Because it does not have a skin. And now the Mishnah continues. Hatsadan litzorech. Now, if you caught them because you actually need them, meaning even though they're not normally animals that are caught, but you capture them because you felt as though you needed them. So then in that scenario, of course, you're going to be chayiv. Because you caught with intention to use these animals. Shelo litzarech, however, if it's not for a intended purpose, someone, for example, goes and captures bees. Okay, it's not common to try and capture bees, or you go to try and capture worms. Okay, just because of whatever, just to play with them, right? So if it's shelo litzarech, I don't actually need the animal. For whatever reason I'm doing it. So then you would be pater. You would be exempt from bringing a karban. Chayav ha'of. So Rashi, by the way, let's just take for a second. Let's look at Rashi. Rashi says, shelo litzarech pater. If you caught them without any specific intention or purpose, you'd be pater. De'ein b'mino nitzud, because these things are not normally caught. And this is a classic example that we just said of doing a malacha, doing a labor on Shabbos, not for its intended purpose. For Reb Shimon, he kidemuki labagamara, and this is according to Reb Shimon, not according to Reb Yehuda, who would say that capturing these items would be prohibited. Chayav ha'of.
Rashi's telling us that the whole Gemara here is going like Rabbi Shimon.
Like Rabbi Shimon. This mission is going like Rabbi Shimon, not like Rabbi Yehuda. Yeah.
Okay.
Which, by the way, leads to a whole question regarding the Rambam's opinion, because the Rambam in one place seems to pass like Rabbi Yehuda, but then he quotes all of these halachos from this Mishnah, which seem to be against Rabbi Yehuda. So there's a very nice shtickle Torah from Rav Chaim Soloveitchik that addresses the Rambam's opinion, and a very important Ran at the end of this chapter that discusses the Rambam's opinion. But we'll have to come back to that. Hachayev ha'of shibur shuso. I have a chaya, I have a wild animal or a bird in my domain, on my property. Hatsadan pater. If I catch them, I'm exempt. Meaning, if I hunt these animals, if I try and capture these animals, I'm exempt. Why? Because they're already in my rishus. Meaning, they're already under the category of captured. They already have the status of being captured, which we'll get back to is very important with regard to pets. V'achovel behen, and if someone injures them, you'd be chayev. Why would you be chayev? Based on exactly what we said before, Rashi again explains, yesh lahen Or again and again and again, Rashi stressing the same point, that if you have skin and you get bruised, that is the way one would be liable for. If you bruise something that has skin, you are going to be liable for bruising on Shabbos. Okay, let's analyze the Mishnah. Number one, we were told that bruising is a prohibition on Shabbos. It's clear from the Mishnah that bruising is a prohibition on Shabbos. That hachovel, you are going to be chayiv. Rashi told us if it has skin. What is this prohibition of chovel? Because when you look back at the Mishnah in the 7th chapter of Masechah Shabbos, when all of the malachos are outlined, so let's take a look. The Mishnah says the following. The Mishnah never has on the list chovel, right? Remember? All the 39 malachos. Avos malachos abarim chasar achas. Hazarev, achorish, v'akotzer, v'ama'amer, v'adash, v'azor, v'habor, hatoch, v'amaraket, halosh, ha'ofe. We don't have anywhere on this list chovel. So what is the prohibition of chovel? Which malacha does chovel fall into? So Tosfos and Rashi, right on the spot, tell us which potential malacha chovel would fall into. Okay? Take a look over here. Rashi says, Diishlan or Kedem Mefarish B'Gemara, V'hav Yilei Chabura, She'ena Choseres. So this is a bruise that the blood, right? We know that a bruise is that there was a bleed under the skin. The blood that came out, that was extracted from the flesh of the animal, is not going to return. V'havile told the shochet, and that is slaughtering. One of the 39 malachos is the malacha of slaughtering. What's slaughtering? Removing blood from an animal, right? From a living animal. So if the animal's alive and you remove blood from it, that's shochet. This is the same thing. You cause the animal to be bruised. Therefore, it's going to be a prohibition of shchita, of slaughtering. Lashon acher, says Rashi, I can give you another one of the malachos that this could fit under. Kiven di'ish lahen or, since it has skin, nitzva ha'or b'dam, hanitzra bo.
Get a black and blue mark.
Exactly. You're going to get a black and blue mark. The animal's going to get a black and blue mark. Anything with skin, it's going to develop a black and blue mark. Therefore, the skin is getting colored. There's going to be coloration on the skin. And therefore, dyeing, which is one of the dyeing is one of the 39 malachos, and therefore, that would be a great example of that. You're coloring the skin. And therefore, by bruising these animals, you are going to violate the malacha of tzoveya, of coloring on Shabbos. Ha'or bedam nitzar bo dechayev mishum tzoveya, says Rashi, okay? Tosfos likes the first opinion of Rashi. Tosfos says, this is Tosfos in two places, also on Daf Ayin Hey. Tosfos says, Lashon sheberish hakonshus mishum tilas neshama, iker kedeparish beperek klal gadol. Tosfos says that he thinks that that it would fall more likely under the prohibition of shchita that Rashi told us, that is told of the shochet, slaughtering, as opposed to soveya. Okay. Tosfos pointed us to this Gemara on Daf Ayin Hey. Take a look at the context of this Gemara over here. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Hatzad chilazon. So if one captures the chilazon is the snail, that the dye from the snail produces tcheles, okay, which was needed in order to build the Mishkan, okay. So if someone captures the chilazon, v'hapotzo, and he breaks open the chilazon. If you've ever seen a clip on how they extract the gland of the chilazon that produces the that produces the tchilas, that's exactly what they have to do. They have to be potzeah. They have to crack it open. Eino chayv ala achas. It's only one malacha. It's one malacha that you violate. Meaning, even though you did two things, you captured the chilazon and you cracked it open. It's only one prohibition on Shabbos. Rabbi Yehuda says, chayiv shtaim. You're going to be liable for two malachas. Shahai Rabbi Yehuda Omer, because Rabbi Yehuda said, Pitzia b'chlal disha, that being potseya, cracking it open, is included in dush. What's dush? Dush is one of the early malachas that we had in the list of the 39 malachos. That after you gather the grain in from the field, so you bring it into the threshing floor. What?
Harvesting or winnowing.
So after you harvest all of the produce, so right, let's take wheat for example. So you harvest all of the wheat or the barley, you bring it to you gather it up. That's ma'amer. Then you bring it to the threshing floor. What do you do at the threshing floor? You throw it onto the ground, and the animal tramples on it with its with the, I don't know what you call it, a thresher, the big board that cracks open all of the seeds in order so that you can extract the berry from within the shaft. And that process of breaking open the berry from the shaft is called dush, threshing. So says Rabbi Yehuda, cracking open the snail is the same thing. You're extracting the goods from the shell, right? So that's dush. Amrulo, the Tanna Kama responds and says, Aim p'tzia b'chal disha. No, splitting open the snail is not included in threshing. Why? So the Gemara has a discussion, what's the machlokas over here? And essentially what the Gemara comes out by saying is that the machlokas over here is whether or not you could apply dush, whether or not you can apply dush to living animals. Meaning that dush, we know, is a malacha that's found in the field, right? It's work that's done on the farm. You gather in the grain, you bring it to the threshing floor, and then you extract the berry from the shaft, okay? But we don't have dush by living things, right? If I remove something from its shell, so then that's not dush. Ain't disha b'gedulei karka. There's no such thing as dush when it comes to gedulei karka. That's exactly what the Gemara says right now. Amar Rava, my time in the Rabbanan. What's the reason behind the rabbis who say that ain psia b'chal disha, that you are not going to be liable for cracking open and extracting the gland? Kasavri ain disha el b'gedulei karka, because threshing only applies to something that grows from the ground, and therefore you're not going to be liable for ptia, for extracting the gland from the chilazon. Okay. The problem with this is the Rambam seems to argue on the chachamim. Again, we now have two opinions how to define chovel, how to define bruising. Is bruising the malacha of shochet, of slaughtering, because you're removing a blood from a living animal, or is chovel part of the prohibition of coloring, because you color the skin? Two opinions in Rashi. Tosos took his stance in terms of that he liked shchita as the malacha, and now take a look at the Rambam. And this Rambam is so surprising when we just learned this Gemara about the chilazon. Says the Rambam the following. Hadash kigogris, okay, so let's say someone threshes the size of a dried fig. You're chayiv, you're liable. The ain disha ela b'gedulei karka, says the Rambam. Disha only applies to gedulei karka. Sticking in line with the chachamim, that there is no such thing as mefarek or pitzia or disha, unless we're talking about things that grow from the ground. Okay? Continues the Rambam, v'amafarek, he told us hadash v'chayev v'chein kol kiyot b'zeh. Okay, fine. But then the Rambam says, hacholei v'tzebehema, let's say you milk a cow. Chayev mishum mefarek. Hold on one second. If I milk a cow, I'm going to be liable for mefarek. Mefarek is dush. It's extracting one thing from its shell. It's extracting the fruit from its shell. It's extracting the product from its shell. So hold on one second. We just said, the Rambam one line earlier says, Ein disha ela bigdule karka, assuming like the rabbis, who said that if I extract something on Shabbos, I'm only going to be liable if that thing grew in the ground. This is a malacha that is specific to work that's done in the field. It doesn't apply to other things, to other products. However, the Rambam then one line later says, if I milk a cow, I'm going to be liable for dush. V'chein, and he continues, hachovel b'chai, shish lo or chayav mishem. And also if you bruise an animal to remove its blood, you're going to be liable for mefarik, for dush, for threshing, for extracting the product from its shell. You're extracting the blood from the shell of the animal, from its skin, from its flesh. So now, just before we analyze the Rambam, we now have our third opinion. Either chovel, bruising, is a prohibition of shochet, it's a prohibition of slaughtering. Number two, chovel is a prohibition of dush, that's what the Rambam assumes, or like or like Rashi, who says that it is coloring, because you color the skin. These are the three opinions we have, but we have to ask this question on the Rambam. The Rambam continues and he says, Bamedvar Mamurim, what are we referring to over here? What are we referring to over here? Says the Rambam, that we're talking about injuring an animal. However, if you injure your friend, that's just kilkul. Okay, and then he goes into Shmona Shratzim, he goes into the 8 rodents. Hamur b'Torah sheishlan oros, that they have skin, like in Shabbos k'mochaya ubehema va'of. So they have the same law of any other animal that you were to bruise. You are going to be liable for dush. Hold on one second. I thought in disha ela b'gedulei karka. The Rambam just told me, the Gemara just told me, in disha ela b'gedulei karka. This only applies to things that grow on the ground. This malach of threshing. So why is the Rambam including it with extracting the blood from these animals over here? So take a look at the Maggid Mishnah. The Maggid Mishnah is one of the early defenders of the Rambam. Early, 15th century defender of the Rambam, very early. Some consider the Maggid Mishnah, they group him as a Rishon, some group him as an early Achron. The Maggid Mishnah writes the following. Din hachabala, shieba chiyuv mavur b'mishnah. If I were to injure an animal, we know that from the Mishnah we just learned before, that you are going to be liable. About ma, shikasav shu mepnei shu mefarik, he told the dash. What does the Rambam mean when he says that you're going to be liable for threshing when you bruise the animal? Who mistabro zal, u'kamoshe kisafta the mala, sha'afal pi she'ein disha ela b'gedulei karka, that even though the Gemara says, and even though the Rambam also concludes where he says, ein disha ela b'gedulei karka, that when it comes to threshing, it only applies to gedulei karka, it only applies to things that grow on the ground. Zeu dafka lemad chilazon ukiyotzebo. This is only to the exclusion of fish, meaning fish or anything else that lives in the water, that is not included in gedulei karka, as opposed to animals that live on earth, that not on earth, that live on the ground and get their sustenance from the ground. They are included in gedulei karka because they grow up, they mature, they develop based on the nutrients they receive from the ground. So the Rambam says that dush doesn't just refer to actual things that grow in the ground, but even things that grow from the ground, that grow up from the ground, that mature, that develop from the ground, as opposed to fish that are totally separated from the ground, being that they're in the water. The Rambam gets this from a Gemara in Maseches Bechoros, I think, on Daf Samach Daled or something like that. But there are definitely Gemaras that would point to this. The Gemara is Maseches Eruvin Daf Chaf Zayin. It also comes up in Bava Metzia Daf Pei Tes. It comes up in a few places in Shas that an animal has the same din as Gedulei Karka because it develops from the ground. And therefore, the halachos, the malachos of things that grow on the ground will apply to these animals as well. This is the opinion of the Rambam. Rashi obviously disagrees. Rashi, and that is exactly what the Maggid says. Rashi pairs that hachiyuv bechabala hu mipnei shu tzovea, that it's due to tzovea coloring. V'yishmi shapirish, like Tosos, that shu mipnei netilas neshama, that it's because you're removing the life source of the animal. And according to both of them, what's the nafkamina between them? The nafkamina, the practical difference between the Rambam and Rashi and Tosos on the other side, is that according to the Rambam, this is included in the malachos that are gedulei karka. Malachos that are gedulei karka, the minimum size in order to be liable for them is if you violated the amount of if you did the malacha the size of a grobris, the size of a dried fig. So bruising would be included in that. According to Rashi and Tosos, tzovea doesn't have a shear. It's any amount of tzovea, of coloring is prohibited. And if it's shchita, any amount of shchita is prohibited. And therefore, according to them, any amount of chabala you would do. According to the Rambam, it would need to be a pretty significant bruise for you to be liable to bring a karban. This is the machlokes found in between Rashi, the Rambam, and Tosos. Okay. I want to just get to now, with the time we have left, the rest of the Mishnah, where the Mishnah said, Shmona Shratzim, okay, the Mishnah said, Chayav ha'of shabir shuso, if I have an animal in my possession, on my property, hatzadan, pater, if I capture them, I'm going to be pater, okay? Of course, Chabala is not going to change as long as they have skin, it's going to be chayav. But why is it that I'm going to be pater if I capture these animals on my that are on my property? So this is quoted in Shulchan Aruch, by the way. Take a look. This is a machlokes, how to understand this halacha between the Ramah and the Machaber and the Ramah, Rabbi Yosef Karo and Rabbi Yosef Karo and Rav Moshe Isserles have a disagreement over here, how to understand this halacha. Says the Shulchan Aruch the following, over here on the right side of the screen. You can see my cursor. Chayav ha'of shabir shuso muter letzudan, a chaya, a wild animal, or even a bird, a wild bird that is on my property, meaning it belongs to me. Muter latzudan, completely permissible. I'm allowed to capture these animals. V'hu shelo yimrodu, it's assuming that they aren't going to run away. Meaning that they've been domesticated in the sense of that this is where they nest, this is where they live. Okay? Aval imhe mordim also l'tafsam, but if you see that they're running out of your field and they're going absolutely wild, you can't stop them. Okay? Meaning if they're behind the gate will stop them. But if there's no gate, you can't stop them from running away. Says the Ramav, yesh omrim da'asur latsud chayav ha'of shabir shuso. The Ramah says, no, this is still prohibited, because take a look, the language, and this is what the Mishnah Berurah explains. What was the language of the Mishnah? The Mishnah said, Chayav ha'of shabir shuso, you have these wild animals in your field that belong to you, hatzadan, someone that captures them, pater. You're pater. What does that mean? Well, we've learned many times what this means is pater of al aser. While you're not going to be liable to bring a karban, but that doesn't mean it's completely permissible to do. It's still prohibited to do. The Shulchan Aruch, though, understands that this is completely permissible, which right away opens up the door to a discussion, which we'll probably have to continue next time, about pets in general, some of the laws pertaining to owning a pet, and what that has to look like on Shabbos, which are discussed straight out in Shulchan Aruch, right over here in Siman Shin Tesayin, and also earlier in Siman Shin Ches. But take a look at the Mishnah Berurah over here, at least just to understand, as a Pesach, to understand, an opening to understand the opinion of Rav Yosef Karo in the Shulchan Aruch. Says the Mishnah Berurah, he says, Chayav ha'of shabir shuso, what our Mishnah said, right? Quoting straight from our Mishnah, that these animals, these wild animals are in your domain. Kollel kol minei ba'alei chayim sharigilin bebayis v'na'asu b'nei tarbos. That the Shulchan Aruch is not limiting this to a chayav and oaf or an oaf, but really any animal that a person would keep on their property, a person would keep in their possession, namely like a pet. Says the Mishnah Berurah further, mutter, according to the Machaber, it's completely permissible to capture these animals. Even if they're outside, you could bring them inside. V'hatam, what's the reason? Kivan shehem b'nei tarbos v'horgulu b'bayis, since this is now has become their natural habitat, meaning that this is where they live, their home, right? This is their home. When the animals are roaming out in your field, right, at night, what's going to happen? They're going to come back inside to go to sleep. Meaning they're domesticated enough that they don't just run away freely. They're not looking to leave. They're domesticated enough that they walk around the property, but then they also go back to the barn to go to sleep, or like a dog who you let outside, a very well-trained dog will know to come right back. They'll go out into the backyard, for example, just to go for a small walk, or to relieve themselves. And then what happens after they're done? They know to come back inside. They're not going to come to my house. They're not allowed in my house. They're going to go back inside the home that they came from. When I want to pick up my personal cat or dog, what do? I walk over to it and I pick it up. It doesn't run away from me. It doesn't try to get away from me. If I tried to do that to a stray chicken, what would I walk over to it and I try to pick it up? What's going to happen? It's going to run away from me. Even if I try doing that to a stray dog or even a stray cat, it's going to try and run away. As soon as it becomes part of my home, so then that's a different story, is what the Mishnah Berurah is trying to teach us. It's already, and look at what the Mishnah Berurah continues. So even when it goes outside, it's as if they're already caught. That's the key line. It's kinitzodin ve'omdin. It's as if they're already caught. And therefore the whole malach of capturing doesn't apply to these animals. And that's why the Shulchan Aruch says mutter. It's completely permissible. Now, the Ramah is working off of a textual basis, because the Mishnah did say that it's still prohibited. It's just that you're patur, you're not liable to bring a carbon. The Shulchan Aruch is thinking beyond the text and saying, hold on one second, why is it that you're patur? You're patur because we treat these things as if they're already caught. Well, if they're already caught, why would it be prohibited at all? It'd be completely mutter. This is the way that the Mishnah Berurah is explaining this machlokas between the Machaber and the Ramah. Now, I just want to point out, as a collector's item opinion, the Tosfos Rid, one of the Balei Tosfos, the Tosfos Rid, says this whole concept of nitzodin va'omdin, we take it even to the extent of animals that in their nature are already caught, meaning they're not in my possession. I don't own them. They don't live in my house. But by nature, these animals are in a quote unquote caught state. What would an animal like that be? A turtle. Says the Tosfos Rid, a turtle is nitzodin va'omdin. Why? Because it's not going very far. In its nature, I don't need to work very hard to. It doesn't run away from me. If I want to pick up a turtle, what do? I just walk over to the turtle, pick it up, right? So the Tosfos Rid says, I don't know whether or not we pass like that Tosfos Rid, but it is a fascinating shita. Okay, we'll stop here for now. We'll have to finish up this discussion about the laws of pets on Shabbos next time, and then I'll have to. By then, you guys are probably gonna be like almost done with the Masechta, so I'll have to catch up with you. All right.
You're good.
Lovely learning with everyone as usual.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Have a great
Bye-bye.
night, guys.
You too.
Bye.